So let's ask a big question. In a democracy, who really has the final say? Is it the people, the politicians they elect, or is it something else? That's what we're diving into today. We're talking about the Supreme Court and its incredible role as the ultimate guardian of the Constitution.
All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the court as the ultimate referee. Then, how it protects your rights. After that, we'll get into something called judicial review. And then, its most powerful tool, the basic structure doctrine. And finally, we'll tie it all together to see why this really matters.
Okay, first up, the court's foundational powers. Let's think of it as the country's ultimate referee.
So, back to that big question. In a democracy, who gets the final say? I mean, what happens when governments are at odds, or when the rules themselves are up for debate? Who blows the final whistle?
Well, that's where the Supreme Court comes in. It's like the referee-in-chief, the only one who can step onto the field when the players are, the governments themselves.
So the court has this thing called original jurisdiction. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It just means that for some really big disputes, like the central government versus a state, or even two states arguing, the case goes straight to the Supreme Court. Bypasses everything else. It's the only place these major showdowns can be settled.
But that's not all. For pretty much every other kind of case, civil, criminal, you name it, the Supreme Court is the final stop, the last court of appeal. Cases work their way up the system, and this is where the buck stops. Period. Their decision is the absolute final word.
So, we've seen how the court is a referee for governments. But what about for us, for regular citizens? Well, this is where it gets really personal. The court also acts as our shield.
And this is pretty amazing. If you feel like your fundamental rights have been violated, you don't have to start at the bottom and work your way up. Nope, you can go straight to the top. You can directly approach the Supreme Court. It's a direct line to defense available to every single citizen.
And don't just take my word for how important this is. The chief architect of the Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, called this very right the heart and soul of the Constitution. I mean, wow, that tells you everything. It's the ultimate safety net.
So how does the court actually do this? It uses these powerful tools called writs. Think of them like the court's superpowers. They can issue a writ to order someone's release from illegal detention, or force a government official to do their job, or even stop a lower court from going too far. They're all about taking action and delivering justice fast.
Okay, so the court protects governments from each other, and it protects us from the government. But what protects the rulebook itself, the Constitution? This is maybe the court's biggest job of all, being the ultimate guardian of that foundational document.
And it does this with a power called judicial review. This is huge. It basically means the Supreme Court can take any law passed by Parliament or a state legislature, put it under a microscope, and ask one simple question. Is this constitutional?
And if the answer is no, the court can just strike it down, gone, declared unconstitutional. A law can fail this test if it violates the Constitution directly, messes with our fundamental rights, or, and you're going to want to remember this one, if it damages what's called the basic structure of the Constitution.
The basic structure, what is that? Well, this brings us to what is arguably the most powerful idea the Supreme Court has ever created. It's a doctrine that draws a line in the sand for political power in India.
The basic structure doctrine it's actually pretty simple but totally revolutionary. It says, look, Parliament, you can amend the Constitution, you can change things, but you cannot destroy its soul. You can't alter its core principles. That fundamental framework, it's off limits.
What's wild is that this doctrine isn't even written in the original Constitution. The Supreme Court basically created it itself, back in 1973, in this landmark case called Keshavananda Party. And they use it. For instance, back in 2015, the court used this very doctrine to strike down a law about how judges are appointed because they felt it messed with the independence of the judiciary, which, you guessed it, is a core part of the basic structure.
So what you have is this constant balancing act, right? On one side, you have Parliament's power to change the Constitution. On the other, you have the Supreme Court's power to protect its basic structure. It's this incredible tug-of-war, and it's right at the heart of the country's democracy.
So what exactly is this untouchable core? Well, the court has laid out some key principles. Things like the supremacy of the Constitution, it's the top dog. The rule of law, nobody is above it. Judicial review itself, the separation of powers, secularism, and of course, a democratic government. These are the non-negotiables, the absolute pillars that hold up the entire system.
Okay, let's zoom out. We've talked about all these different powers, the ultimate referee, the shield for citizens, the guardian, but why? Why does any of this matter? What's the big picture?
This really breaks it down nicely. That power of judicial review, that's what keeps the Constitution supreme. The writs we talked about, that's your personal shield for your fundamental rights. The basic structure doctrine, that's the ultimate check on government power. And being the final court of appeal, that's what guarantees the rule of law for everyone. It all fits together.
You see, at the end of the day, these aren't just dry legal ideas. They're the firewalls. They are the safeguards that keep the whole system from sliding into something it's not supposed to be. They make sure the government has to play by the rules, which is what protects our rights and our democracy.
And that leaves us with a really big question to chew on. This incredibly powerful court, it's made up of unelected judges. So how does a democracy balance that with the will of the people who vote for their leaders? How do you balance the power to change things with the power to protect things that should never change? There's no easy answer, and that debate is right at the core of what it means to be a modern democracy.